Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dokkan battle video, and today I've got another top 10 list for you, and one I thought would be interesting is to do the top 10 worst releases in Dokkan history, and what I'm talking about here are, this can be any summonable unit, but this is only talking about on release, so this will have nothing to do with EZAs, so you might see units on here that are actually quite good now, but I'm talking about their initial release, and any summonable unit, so this includes Dokkan Fest, LRs, and banner units. Okay, and the way I kind of qualified units for this list, it's units that, like when they came out, like raised an eyebrow, like why are you doing this? This makes no sense. Units where you actively would not want to summon them, or like if you got them, it was basically like, well, I guess I have this for collection purposes. So you could also consider this almost a dead on arrival type of list, but for me, it's just very odd and questionable releases, like not good units. Terrible releases in the game's history. So I'm going to start off with some honorable mentions. A lot of the units on this list are going to be banner units because that's the spot I think where Dokkan messes up the most. But there are some Dokkan Fest, some premium LRs on here as well that I felt were just very, very questionable releases, right? So for honorable mentions, we'll start with this unit here. This is Thouser, which is Cooler's Armored Squadron card. And the reason why this one's on the list is this came out... what was it? I think it was during the Cooler Worldwide, was it not? It might have been before then, but I feel like this was like a Cooler Worldwide card or maybe earlier than that. But this unit really doesn't make sense. Well, one, the links on this unit are god-awful, right? And being like a type of banner unit that this is, you would want them to be, at bare minimum, like a decent support unit. But this unit really didn't do anything. I think they wanted them to be like some weird damage unit, but they don't link well with any coolers. You see this link set, you got things like Cooler's Armored Squad, Cooler's Underling, Brainiacs, like Loyalty. These are not links that Cooler units have. So there's actually quite a bit of anti-synergy there. This unit had nobody to link with, and just wasn't a very good, impressive unit. And actually, what we can do is we can look at the kit before EZA. So if we look at the kit before EZA, they got stats per Terrifying Conquerors on the team, launches 2 additional attacks, each with a rare chance of becoming a super tech when there's a unit whose name is Cooler on the team, right? So literally this unit did nothing. They got stats and some additionals that had a low chance of being a super attack. Like terrible, terrible design unit. And so terrible design for multiple things, right? We've seen throughout the game's history that when they try to make a banner unit, like just a damage unit, it doesn't work because you're always going to want to put the premium Dokkan Fest and LRs there anyways. And so for a unit like this, they give you absolutely no value in slot 3. They can't tank, they don't do damage, they don't support in any way. Like, what is the point of this unit? And there's no like linking from this unit, like nothing valuable. This is just such a nothing release unit. So yeah, Cooler's Armored Squadron there. Taking up one of my honorable mention slots, right? God Vegeta, I wanted to throw God Vegeta down as an honorable mention at least. He wasn't like terrible on release, but boy was he so overshadowed by the Tech God Goku, who is just so much like leagues above this guy. And I think the big shaft that this guy got was the Goku had like guaranteed 77% damage reduction, where this guy just got a chance to guard, right? So this guy got really shafted just on his kit and being overshadowed. He's probably not like the worst unit on this list, and that's why he's an honorable mention, but he just got really shafted and not a good release in relation to the unit that dropped with him, right? We have to throw our boy Chow Man down here. Now, the reason why Chow Man didn't make my main list is because, you know, he came out at a time where like units could just be like units were so generic that there was just a lot of generically bad units out there. But this guy was uniquely bad in that he was pretty much just an AoE unit, but he absorbed literally 20% of your health on super. So such a bad unit, like just a meme unit. We can look at it here too. We can go to the growth tab. We can like Chow Man was this, remember, this was Chow Man on release, and that's what we're talking about. Worst units on release. And here's the super attack, mass damage to all enemies. Man, mass damage. It's been forever since I've seen mass damage on a card. That's like worse than supreme damage, and that's worse than extreme damage. So it was mass damage, extreme, supreme, and then immense. So yeah, mass damage is like super bad damage to all enemies while sacrificing 20% HP. The only thing this guy was good for was later on when active skills came out. He was good for helping you like get into an HP requirement if you just wanted to do like testing with a unit. But boy, Chow Man, pretty bad. Actually, after reading that, he almost should be on my top 10. He is so bad. Chow Man, pretty terrible release, right? Let's go to the next honorable mention. I'm going to throw STR Broly on the list. This unit actually just, like, makes me angry. Like, really makes me angry. So this is a unit that came out for this is a 7th anniversary banner unit, by the way, right? So, like, a premium celebration dropping this guy, and there's a couple of really big problems with him. One is they dropped him when Broly's weren't good. Like right now, worldwide, Broly's are great. Like that's when they should have dropped a unit like this, right? But at that time, Broly's weren't that great. And this is another case of a unit that they just tried making into like a generic damage unit and didn't really make sense on any teams when he came out. Like Big Bad Bosses weren't that good during 7th anniversary. So I don't know what they were thinking with this guy, like other than he kind of fit the theme, right? Because one was the Broly movie, the Year 7 tech LR that fuses into Gogeta as a part of the active skill. That's where this Broly dropped, right? So he's kind of fitting the theme that way. But yeah, he's just attack and defense. He gets more stats while performing a super. Disables guard, not the biggest deal. An additional. So here's the thing. He wants ki, right? He can get a guaranteed additional with ki, but he's got no orb changing. And he's got the stupid final blow mechanic, dude. We all hate the final blow mechanic. So yeah, this Broly just had nothing going for him. Like, even if like Broly's or like movie bosses were good at the time, like you still wouldn't want to slot this guy on. Just not good. Just a generic damage unit as a banner unit. Didn't have a place. Didn't really do anything, right? STR Super Boost. So this is going to be my first, Dokkan Fest I'm mentioning. Once again, this is still honorable mention list. We'll get to the top 10 quickly here. But yeah, this is just a unit that came out, was very underwhelming on release, not really worth summoning on. The Boo team wasn't really that good when this guy came out. I think this is just, I just look at this guy and I think of him as one of the more underwhelming Dokkan Fest releases in the game's history. But we're going to see some doozies coming up here, right? Then I want to put this AGL Krillin down. This is another anniversary banner unit. This guy came out 6th anniversary when we were doing the reps of U7 stuff. So a couple of big problems with this guy. One is that, like, they did a pretty good job at stacking reps of U7, but this guy got overshadowed by like free-to-play units. Now, to be fair, it was one of the best anniversaries for free-to-play units in the game's history, to be honest, between Physical UI Goku and Physical Master Roshi. Like, those two were juggernauts, and then the tech, Tien and Krillin was also very good. So there was some really good free-to-play units there, but this guy being like a premium banner unit, just not good. And the big thing with this guy, once again, doesn't support just a generic damage unit, and he wanted an Android 18 with him, and there wasn't a good reps of U7 Android 18 to run on the team. They meant for you to pair this guy with the free-to-play Int Krillin in 18, which was actually probably one of the worst free-to-play units out of that celebration. So yeah, this guy just really didn't have a place. Reps of U7 was very good without this guy, and just having that Android 18 specification didn't help him at all. Now, I think a well-timed EZA, this Krillin actually could be quite good, but we'll have to see. And then that's it for my honorable mentions. So what I'm going to do is I'm very briefly here just going to black out because I don't want to spoil my other list. So before, we're going to go to the main list here, and then we are going to go here. Perfect. All right, so we're going to unblack out. There we go. All right, so now my actual top 10 list. Now, like my other top 10s, this won't be in any particular order, but I will like rank some of the main ones at the end as I get through. So the first one on my list here is the, I can't even pronounce all their names. This is the Weird Universe 2 unit that came out, I think it was with LR Ribrianne or around that time, whatever. It was around the same time that LR Ribrianne came out. And this unit is just god-awful. And they're focused around like Power of Wishes. Yeah, they get stats per Power of Wishes or tournament participants, but this right here is just a generic damage unit, right? They don't have any support or anything. They're gonna have very wonky link set, right? They've got signature pose, which is fine, right? That's going to go do good with the special pose units. But then they've got stuff like More Than Meets the Eye, Metamorphosis, which is like a villain link, Infighter, Solid Support, like some of that stuff you might be able to get, but it's a very wonky link set. They're not really supporting. They're not really doing good damage. Like, I don't know what you do with this unit, right? Just a really good example of a nothing banner unit that like released and you just did not care about, right? Here, and this is kind of a crazy unit to bring up, right? Because we look upon this unit quite favorably right now, right? And this unit was on my top 10 best EZAs of all time list. And the reason why, part of the reason they were high on that list was because they were so bad when they came out. And that's why they're on this list. Just a terrible, terrible on-release unit. I won't go too deep into it. We've talked about this unit before, but Reps of U7 was already super overloaded. This unit had to attack a bajillion times to build up a minuscule amount of damage reduction that wasn't even worth it. Their damage was super low and underwhelming. They came on one of those really bad Yellow Coin LR banners. That this was the era of, if it's an anniversary, you go all in on part 1 and don't even touch part 2. So like people weren't even getting this guy. There wasn't room for them on the team. Their defense wasn't good enough. Their damage wasn't good enough. They didn't support. Nothing. Terrible, terrible unit on release, right? All right, let's go to the next one here. Kaioken Goku. Now this one might get people a little uppity because I think a lot of people like this unit. But this guy was one of these global first. I want to say this was a global first. It might have been like a Christmas unit or a holiday unit. I think it was in that range, right? And this unit was terrible. And I remember they did like the Dokkan nail for them, or the equivalent of that. And they're like, oh yeah, this is like a mega damage unit. They wanted this guy to be a beefy attacker. And this guy was hitting like for 1 mil attack stats. Now, granted, we know he's a build-up unit. He needs to get hit and build up. But this dude just looks so unimpressive for being a quote-unquote damage unit. The one saving grace for this guy was his Spirit Bomb did do good damage back in the day. But in terms of just a regular unit, and I think this is a unit that tricked people because he seemed really cool at first. But he aged like sour milk, like really bad. And he just felt terrible to use. And he has this terrible, on release, the terrible setup of not being defensive at all, yet needing to get hit to build up. And then he was an attack stacker, and that was part of his theme of like doing a lot of damage. But attack stacking, as we've seen, it isn't very impactful. It was impactful for the Spirit Bomb, but this guy was a one-trick pony. It was all about the Spirit Bomb, but his regular damage, his regular defense, nothing was good about this guy. And it was a period where I feel like Global was just really shafted on some of these Global first units because just not very good, right? And this is one that maybe, if people disagree with stuff, maybe this is one that people are going to bring up because I know a lot of people like this guy, but I thought he was terrible on release. His EZA was really good. They just mistimed it a bit because then by the time Reps of U7 became insane, he's not good enough now. So I loved his EZA. His EZA was awesome. He was really impressive, but they timed it very poorly. All right, this guy, we can't go any type of bad unit list without talking about Tech Super Saiyan 3 Broly. This guy ultimately has to be on worst releases of all time because of the negative defense per orb. This guy on release literally would have 0 defense. Like, you literally would click the screen after grabbing orbs and he would have 0 defense, okay? Now, the thing for this guy at the time, I don't think he'd be number 1 worst release because this guy had value in that he was the only Extreme Tech 120 lead, right? He was the premium leader for that, so if you wanted to run Extreme Tech, you had to run him. His damage has always been good. For every iteration of this guy, he had damage. That's what they wanted with him. And defense wasn't as important at the time. Like, sadly, you could get away with 0 defense and not get one shot because that's just the way the game was back then. But boy, this guy was a risk to run because the defense was just nothing. And having to hold back to like not lose the defense feels really bad when you have like a really good offensive powerhouse character. So we already know how bad Tech Super Saiyan 3 Broly. I don't need to say any more right there. Dude, okay. LR Super 17. By the way, this guy's reminding me of another honorable mention that I didn't put in because I actually don't have the unit. But LR Omega Shenron, I think, also qualifies as like a worst release. The only reason he didn't make my list is because he's actually like, his kit inherently is good. There was just no GT boss support for him, which is why I bring this guy up, because this guy, likewise, on release, was just so shafted and so underwhelming because he wants GT bosses who did not have any type of leader skill. He doesn't have a team, like a proper team to run this guy. So to run this guy at his best, when he released, you had to just run him with really bad units to see him good. And the game completely screwed this guy over because they just never gave him what he needed ever. So this is a unit I do hope they fix when his EZA comes around. I hope they time it well, which it does seem like Dokkan is getting a lot better at like thematic releases and holding EZAs for proper celebrations, because I think they're realizing that just dropping random stuff without a team is not good. Even if the character's good, players are not gonna, like, players are smart. They're not gonna summon for a character. I will say inherently this guy on release isn't a bad unit, but it was such a poor release because of what they did not give him that he needed. And they did not do it ever in time for this guy ever to be relevant. So they really shafted Super 17 really bad. I hope they like fix him when they EZA him, right? This guy I'm going to tell you right now is a top contender. This guy might be number 1 or 2 for me. Physical Nova Shenron, one of the most questionable releases in Dokkan history for sure. And we can just take a look at this guy, right? Attack and defense 140, plus an additional attack and defense 40, and high chance of performing a crit when attacking extreme class enemies. Key 2, an additional attack and defense 40 when there is a Shadow Dragon Saga category enemy. And then Shadow Dragon Saga category super class allies defense plus 40. All right. So this is like one of the worst designed units in Dokkan history. One, he's super class. And I get it. There's a moment when Nova kind of turns over and does go against the Shadow Dragons. But inherently, if you look at this guy, right, he is still a Shadow Dragon. And he's got Shadow Dragon links. He literally has the Shadow Dragon link. Attack and defense 20%, right? But for some god-awful reason, they geared his passive around super class. So, like, he wants to be fighting against Shadow Dragon Saga enemies, which is not very common, right? And he's a support unit, but only for super class. That is just terrible, terrible design. Because you don't, like, this guy's not going to link with super class units. You don't, like, I don't, like, the super class team is like Saiyans, right? Like Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Vegeta, Super Saiyan 3 Goku, like stuff like that, Pan, whatever. This guy's not going to link or help the team other than being that little bit of a generic defense support. My hope is when they EZA this guy, I mean, they're going to have to keep this crap for superclass in there. But what I hope they do is they just add, they either change it to all types or they just give him a separate extreme class and super class buff, right, for support. What I would think they could do with this guy to like really help him, they have to gear this guy back towards extreme class. Let's just say he gives extreme class allies attack and defense, or no, let's say he gives all allies attack and defense 40%, and then the way they can save this, like with keeping the feel of his passive, then just give super class an additional 40% defense still. So then what it is like, okay, he's a good 40% support for like everybody, so with your extreme units that you want, but then if you happen to be running super class like they want you to do, then sure, he can be a busted 80% defense support, and maybe you'd be worth running at that point. But this guy just, yeah, make absolutely no sense, being that he's geared around super class when he's a freaking Shadow Dragon, which is already a super limited team, and you need Shadow Dragons to link with your other Shadow Dragons. Terrible unit. Hey, speaking of terrible units that don't gel with what you want, we've got Super Saiyan Kaba here. This is Int Kaba. The one thing is with him, I would definitely rank him higher than Nova Shenron just because he at least has a support skill that is usable, right? He's a generic Universal Survival Saga support, so we like that. The thing that we don't like about it is, you know, Kaba units you typically want to run with U6. They geared this guy to run next to a Vegeta. And at the time, like, there wasn't the craziest Vegetas you'd want to run with this guy. This guy had the most value on the Universe 6 team. And that's where you want to run him. But then you missed out on that Vegeta part of his passive, right? Now, to be fair, all he gets with the Vegeta is an extra 60% attack. So I guess it's not the biggest deal. But even that, like, this unit wasn't good enough offensively or defensively, even as a support unit, that you could afford running him. He just was a defensive liability and got you killed a lot. So this guy's kind of like a meme release. We make fun of him in the community for a reason. I think this guy, though, could be saved with a good EZA. And with how good, say, Int Evolution Blue Vegeta is right now, if he EZA soon, it wouldn't be a bad thing. maybe would be worth running, right? Especially if they give this guy like a really good chance to dodge, or maybe they give him like, what if this guy was like, say, 50% damage reduction base, but then if he had a Vegeta, he got another 30% damage reduction. That would really make you want to run him on like the reps of U17 with that Vegeta, right? So they definitely could save this guy, but I think it was just really wonky having the Vegeta part. And I get why, right? Sometimes Dokkan likes to do these story-driven cards where it's like, yeah, Vegeta's kind of his mentor. They wanted him to be a part of the card, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he also get a unit super with Vegeta? Yeah, he's got a unit super with Vegeta as well. So they just tied this guy way too heavily to Vegeta when you just wanted to run him on U6 at the time. So that's really the big flaw with Kaba. Speaking of Universe 6, this Frost, just a ghastly release, because this guy was AGL Kale's partner, right? Her banner unit. The thing with AGL Kale is that she really needed a unit to help her survive in slot 1. Like, once when Kale dropped, she was really good. One of the best TURs in the game on release. But the problem was pre-transformation, she couldn't sit in slot 1, but she was good in slot 2. So you needed a Universe 6 unit that could sit in slot 1 and help her until she got transformed. And that's what we needed Frost to do. Now, Frost does support, which is something we want. But Frost wasn't defensive enough to do what you want to do, even in slot 3. Once again, has some good things in his kit, but geared a little bit too much on debuffing, where like you can't necessarily debuff a lot with these characters in hard, because he has an attack down in his kit, which can be good, and then gets stats if the enemy's an attack down or defense down. But guess what? When this guy released all the hard red zone fights, like, bosses nullified everything. Like, you couldn't debuff them. I never like when they put too much of a unit's kit focused on debuffing, because then they're almost relegated to like Super Battle Road units, which that's never a good thing, because you want units to be good in like a majority of content, or like a vast amount of content. And if you're relying too much on debuffs, there's just too much content that locks you out. And then the other thing is, this guy being a Frost, I mean, I get it, he's Universe 6, but the Universe 6 team is like Saiyan. So what this banner unit needed to be, this needed to be like a support unit, like a Caulifla, that could sit in slot 1 with maybe like 70% chance to dodge, maybe damage reduction before attacking, and the same amount of support. That's what Kale needed. So what hurts most about this Frost was Kale desperately needed Universe 6 units that were good, and this Frost was not good enough. Okay? Speaking of Universe 6 is on a roll right now. We just had 3 Universe 6 units in a row. We have Tech Hit, and this guy's in line with Kaioken Goku, the STR Kaioken Dokkan Fest Goku, because this is another global first Dokkan Fest that was just terrible on release. We've talked about this guy a ton on the channel when I've done these lists, because he's, once again, one of those just units that was bad. So if it's like a bad tier list, this guy's on there. He actually made it on a good tier list, though, because I thought he was one of the better easy A's. But this guy literally just had no defense. Stunning is a big part of his kit, which we just talked about. Debuffing, having too much of your kit rely on that is not good, because stunning, like, this guy was pretty much a Super Battle Road unit. He was a very good Super Battle Road unit, but for like generic content, just not good. He was like okay for like a week, and then like the game just started power creeping him so much to the point where like his defense couldn't cut it. His damage wasn't good enough, all of that. This guy was just a poorly timed, poorly released unit. They didn't make him good enough for what he was at the time, right? Next up, and I believe this is number 1 on the list, and I think this is the last unit, Physical Raditz. We don't need to say much about him. I think everybody knows how just god-awful terrible this is. This guy's release was so bad, we refer to him as an anomaly. Like, he was so far below what other Dokkan Fests were doing, it was actually mind-boggling. And this, the only way I could explain how terribly they treated this guy, the only way I can explain why they did it, is I think they just way overvalued AoE. And this is a common thing. There's 2 mechanics that Dokkan way overvalues that have turned units terrible. One of them is AoE, and another one is healing when attacking. So like Tech Super Boo's Easy A is an example of a unit that he heals when he attacks, and they valued it too high, and they just made him god-awful in every other way. Well, AoE units, generic AoE units, they've gotten better at it, but we saw this with like Chow Man. They value the AoE so much that they hold way back in other areas. This guy was being underperformed. I remember on release, there were free-to-play units that I believe even came out in his same celebration. I'm like, I think this unit's better than Raditz, right? Like, just really, really bad. And we could even look at just older free-to-play units. I mean, on release, you know, this guy came out, what, over a year after, say, free-to-play Master Roshi, like the LR free-to-play, and that Master Roshi was hands down better than this guy. You'd rather use him, right? But this guy just doing super low attack stats. Sure, it was AoE, but it didn't matter. The one thing this guy had was, sure, you could throw him in World Tournament, but this guy is just terrible defensively, terrible offensively, did AoE, which is one of the worst mechanics, I feel like, for a premium Dokkan Fest to focus on, because AoE is really just World Tournament. Now, we have had some decent, like, side events, like the Cybermen one. Some of the new, like, memorable battles have had, like, AoE stuff in there, because they wanted to do some stuff for, say, like, that STR Super Easy Broly. So they have, like, lately done a couple of things with multi-unit fights where AoEs can be good. But for the most part, AoEs are irrelevant outside of World Tournament. And so this guy just was terrible. And the time slot, this was the time slot between Anniversary and Worldwide. So they just made this guy like the easiest skip in Dokkan history. I would say this guy probably for me is the #1 worst release in Dokkan history. And I think, yeah, that takes us back to the beginning. So let's look at my list here. So I won't rank all of them, but the ones that are concrete to me, I think I'm putting this Raditz at #1 worst release in Dokkan history. I don't think I'll get a lot of negative feedback about that. I think most players will probably agree with me. And then at #2, I think I actually am going with this Nova Shenron. Just is so mind-boggling to me. I might have this guy at like #2. Like, I do not understand what they were thinking with this guy. This is just one of the worst designed units in Dokkan history, one of the worst releases, and I think everything else, it's kind of debatable up to what you feel. But anyways, guys, that's my top 10 list for most, like, worst releases in Dokkan history. What I would like to know in the comments, if there are any that maybe you strongly disagree with me on, or if you want to chime in and agree with me. And then I want you guys to throw out any units that you feel like were very bad releases that you feel like maybe could have made my list, or maybe an honorable mention. So let me know what y'all think. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.